Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Sandra Wiley. I'm the president at Boomer Consulting, and with me today is Jess Camp. Hi, Jess, and thank you so much for being on this episode of the podcast.
You are so welcome. I'm grateful for the invite.
Well, we're happy to have her here. And Jess is the Chief People Officer at Adams Brown. Today, we're going to be talking about C-suite tips and tricks for transitioning from one managing partner to the next. And many of you out there, you're dealing with this right now, or you have dealt with this in the past, or you're going to be dealing with it over the next couple of years. So, let's just start out by Jess. Could you just tell our audience a little bit about you and the position you hold as Chief People Officer?
Sure. Well, I'm a Kansas kid. I graduated K-State. That is actually where I met my husband. We moved to Kansas City after college, and that's where I started my HR career at a 2,000-person engineering firm. And I was there about 8 months, and I quickly moved to a smaller firm. And why that was is that I really was able to grab a breadth of experience in all the facets of HR. And it was a very valuable move, probably one that I didn't put enough weight on until the last few years, but it was allowed me to be exposed to so many spaces in my field, hone in on some and become an expert. But that exposure to all of those areas of HR has really allowed me to more effectively lead my teammates today because I understand their worlds. And I can bring the spaces together to help guide a lot of our leaders here at Adams Brown in the people space that's not first nature to them. So was at the engineering firm for many, many years, went through an acquisition, which I think is also valuable experience of being a leader of the people space. And then I was recruited away to come to Adams Brown. So my role here as Chief People Officer is to truly lead the professionals on my team to increase, in my opinion, the work environment here, the talents of our already talented people. We work really hard to pour into the people space so that our professionals are at their best to provide top-notch service for our clients.
I love that. And all of that experience that you have brought to the table has been so valuable to this firm. And it's interesting that so many times I meet people like you who are coming from a different profession or they come from a different background and they infuse all of that into the firm that they're in. And most of the time, our HR professionals are not people who came from another CPA firm. Yeah. They came from all different kinds of walks of life. So when you think about that, so you walked into this space and place and there has been a transition from a current, what a lot of people would say, managing partners into a new managing partner. And I'm wondering, tell me a little bit about that transition, how it began, and how soon were you brought into that process as that transition started to happen?
Sure. Yeah, our firm is more of a corporate structure. So our MP is actually known as CEO. Yeah. We have a full C-suite. But prior to taking on this structure, we had a unique setup beginning in 2019. We implemented what we called regional managers. Those individuals led the office leaders in our 12 locations. They were split up by region, just like the title says. And that structure was in place for about 2 years until we moved to segment leader organization. So think through our service lines, audit, tax, wealth, tech, and then our industry leaders. So the 5 spaces that we really hone in on: ag, manufacturing, healthcare. We moved to that structure in 2021, and we had a VP over those leaders. And just so happens, our CEO today, who was put in place, he was granted the role and earned the role actually June of 23. He was a regional manager and he was the VP over those segment leaders. And now it was a natural progression for him to move into our CEO role. I was brought into finalizing that regional manager structure quite early. The thought and the beginning process was in place before I joined the firm. But when we worked through those regional manager meetings and those connections to bring it to a one firm feeling, I was brought in early on in those meetings. The collaboration between their strategic vision about what they wanted to do on the accounting side and my people point of view, I believe it really enhanced our decision making as a team. From there, we migrated into that seg lead structure and the VP role. Again, I was part of restructuring that that part of our organization. Initial meetings, communication plan to the rollout of the stakeholders, and making sure that we had that rollout in the right order. Partners, and then our additional leadership team, and then to the population. That's very important when you're writing out a communication plan. So about 2 years before Brian's our exiting CEO term end, we were already having conversations with those 3 regional managers, and then Ben in the VP role. Brian began about the 18-month mark, I would say. He began formally mentoring Ben through one-on-one discussions about firm governance, the partner group makeup, and then eventually we moved into overlap of C-suite oversight. So mostly Brian really navigated that timeline to ensure that Ben was brought along in a timely manner, but we weren't rushing through it. So I would say at least 18 months we worked through that process. And then about 12 months from the changeover, Ben started to sit in our one-on-ones, the C-suite meetings, and then we kind of had a slow progression of a teeter-totter. You could see Ben was starting to lead some of those meetings, and Brian was just attending. It was a really good, well thought out timeline, in my opinion.
I love that. So there was a process that they followed.
Yes.
When you think of, so I heard some words in there that I loved: communication, collaboration. There was some structure,
Yes.
And that you were brought in really early in the process, that you weren't left out of it. In fact, they really looked at you and helped you. You helped them navigate well. So what could others be prepared for as they're going through this experience? Because there's a ton of firms out there going through it. And what do you think is the biggest challenge that came up for you that you maybe didn't see coming or that you were surprised about?
As long as Ben has been here, and he started his career with us and became partner very, very early. He might have been 31, and I'm aging him, don't tell. And he's really known Adams Brown from the inside out for quite a while. I made the assumption that they would operate somewhat similarly, but they have different points of view. They have different personality traits. They have different communication styles. So I think that caught me off guard. Knowing that Ben has been mentored by many partners throughout his time here at Adams Brown, I did make an assumption that this would be a little bit more the same as it was under Brian. But they have, like I said, different personalities, different strengths. They bring different points of view to the table because of their tenure with the firm, I think. Brian's been with us 35 years. Ben's going to have to take some time to build a stronger rapport with some of our leadership team. While he knew them and they worked together, Ben's in a different role and with CEO. And when we get different titles, we don't think anything personally changes, but individuals look at you different when you have a different title. And so he's navigating that. And I'm grateful that I get to be alongside him and have those coaching calls with him, just like I do many other employees and leaders at Adams Brown. So that was probably our biggest challenges, is I made the assumption that they would be similar. The other thing is we moved fast, Sandra. We moved from a structure of office to 2 years later to a structure of segment leader. And now 2 years later, we have a new CEO. There's been a lot of change, and navigating that is always emotional. And you must show patience. Again, I go back to that communication plan is key. It has got to be top notch, and it has to be well thought out.
Boy, there's a wealth of information in what you just said. And I thank you.
We did it all right, Sandra. I promise you.
It's funny though, right? Because we go into it with all the high hopes that we're going to get everything perfect, and we don't, right?
Yep.
But one thing that you said that I love, and I believe every time I have seen a switch of power at the top from one managing partner, or in your case, CEO, to another. And this happens not just at the managing partner or CEO level, but probably every level that there is. There is some really great things that the successor has done to set you up for success. Brian did a great job of that.
Yes.
But the firm then had grown and developed and gone into a space and place where they needed kind of a new leader or a different direction, right? So now you've got your new CEO that's going to be different, but in a very good way. And someday down the road, that will change, and the new leader will bring their best unique efforts to the table, their expertise to the table, and that will create something different there. Different is not bad. It's just different, right? It's just change.
Absolutely.
So I love that, how you said that. I like also fast moving, lots of change, very emotional, need my patience. Oh my gosh, there's a wealth of everything in there. You know, I asked you at one time, was there a process that your firm followed? And what was the one thing that if you were coaching someone else that you would have changed, or at least, or maybe even done the same? So we had a great conversation about that. I'm curious, what will you tell our audience about the process itself of finding this new executive for your firm, this new CEO? What do you think that others could learn from what you have experienced in the last few months?
Well, we have the guidelines outlined in our operating agreement that we had to follow, some timelines of when our successor had to be named, the voting process, some of those nuts and bolts. The biggest thing that we gained from the way that our structure was the multiple exposures the firm had to Ben before he even became managing partner. The internal progression from regional manager to vice president and then to CEO was really, really valuable. Someone way smarter than me maybe had already visioned this out back in 2018 when they were brainstorming our structure and knowing that Brian was going to be retiring from the managing partner role. Our partners have had multiple avenues of exposure to Ben. Either they helped groom him in his career. They were under him when he was a regional manager, a segment leader. They even maybe grew up alongside him. They started at Adams Brown within a couple of years. They became partners. A handful of them that became partners within a year of each other. And just having those avenues for Ben to be exposed to multiple levels of the firm and then the firm as a whole is really, really valuable. As a regional manager and even as VP, we had been speaking at our annual State of the Firm with the other regional managers. We began pulling those regional managers into the presentations after the first year of that structure being in place. So he's had 4 years, so to speak, of speaking directly to our population. And a couple of years ago, we started ABCD, all the happenings at Adams Brown. And those are monthly 30-minute town halls. We frequently have put him in there as a guest speaker or even just we put some questions in place that he was going to ask to be present in the presentation. And so strategically putting him in front of the population has been super, super valuable. I really encourage individuals to find an avenue that if you are, 3 years out from managing partner retirement, looking at your leadership team to say who are maybe a population of 3 or 4 that you believe may want to go after this, and how can you continue to give them exposure to the firm and even just practicing talking in front of population, being present and genuine when you are speaking to others. It's a trait that will carry you well no matter if you go after the CEO role or not.
I love that. And I think, when you talk about the process, I'm really glad that you talked about things other than just the operating agreement, because there is other parts of it, right? The exposure and getting them to know the firm. And I've been asked before, do you think a CEO of a firm can come from outside? Could we basically go out to the world and look for a CEO and bring them in? And I feel like at least at Adams Brown this time around, that Ben had a leg up because his experience at the firm and his knowledge of the firm really set him up for success. So I would never say never, but at least in this case, I think it was a good thing. So
I think your selection process would have to be very detailed. Your communication would need to be just spot on. And you'd have to have the right personality who's not going to come in and just flip the world upside down. They're going to show their respect of what you've built over the last umpteen years of your organization and gain an understanding before suggesting any changes.
Yep.
But yeah, it's doable.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
as I'm sitting here thinking about your position as Chief People Officer, there are more and more really amazing people that are sitting in that seat these days. And they're all sitting out there listening to this podcast, thinking to themselves, so what is it that is the most important thing for me as the Chief People Officer to bring to the table um, that would help in this process and help in the exchange from one CEO to the other, from Brian to Ben? What could a Chief People Officer like you do to really make that a smooth transition? What do you think?
I don't have one. I have three that kind of come to mind. One, take the opportunity to pull things from your CEO's plate. What is she or he doing that they shouldn't be? Or how can you enhance something that is currently on their plate? Example, performance management of partners. Never really been fun. Solely done by the managing partner in the past. And now we have an entire committee with HR leading the effort with a more holistic view on the performance of our partners to provide truly valuable coaching on how they can continue to get better. Because we have a saying around here, partner is not a destination. You don't make it and then just chill. There's no drinks with little umbrellas. We are constantly building our leadership team, and that's including our partner group. Financial reports, our CFO capitalize on their skill set. Before the managing partner did a lot of that analyzing of the data. Use your talent in your C-suite, and sometimes you kind of have to boss your CEO to say, you know what, I should be doing that for you. Let me take a stab at that and softly pull yourself into their world and take some things off of them. So that's really number one. Insert yourself as a champion of the people space and show that value that you have as a Chief People Officer. And it might take a little bit of time, but they'll eventually see, that was a good idea that we had Jess do that. Be flexible is number two. Holy cow, new leaders, like I said earlier, don't assume anything. You must be super open to pivoting at a moment's notice with ever-changing landscape in this industry. This industry is a wild one. I've learned that from the change from my engineering world, but we continually drive changes in our firm initiatives. So we have to be able to pivot in the people space. And then the last one I would say is just be a champion for both the new CEO and the exiting CEO. Some will doubt the new CEO. We are a trust but heavily verified industry. So be sure that you are always speaking positive support about the new CEO while also showing appreciation for the exiting CEO. It's easy to say, well, that never got done, or that would never have happened, or why are we doing this now because of the new, you're going to have some naysayers. It is our responsibility as Chief People Officers to bring that positive encouragement and appreciation for both the new and the exiting. You got to learn your new CEO personality quirks and how can we adapt to bring the best out of that new person.
Wow. You're so right. And I love that part about being the champion for both. You do not have to pick a side. Your side is both of them, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. I love that.
Yep.
So as we're coming to a close here, I'm curious, are there any resources that you would recommend to the audience if they are preparing to transition from one leader to another in the firm? What do you think some of the resources are that they can get their hands on or they can take advantage of that would help them be as spectacular as you are?
Well, thank you for that compliment. We actually engaged you, Sandra, there at Boomer right before, is probably about a year, maybe a little bit less. We had already named Ben as our successor. We engaged you. I don't know if you remember, several years ago, you came in and you did Colby assessments on our exiting CEO, our new CEO, and the entire C-suite, and really understanding how each of us work. It was incredibly valuable insight there. People's tendencies for their strengths, people's weaknesses, and how, okay, if you're going to assign Jess XYZ, you're going to need to make sure you surround her with ABC to ensure her success. Or you need to pair these two up on certain projects because they're going to maximize their skill set to get it across the finish line. Or, as I giggled when I got my report, don't match up these two people because they tend to work the same, and you're going to get great ideas, but getting across the finish line is not going to happen. And so I would highly encourage a C-suite team to take a Kolbe assessment and really work through those findings. And then the other thing is maximize your director of internal comms. Even if you don't have a director of internal comms, having a committee that really is always thinking about the organization the communication to the organization, the cadence, the stakeholders who should know what first and second and third is valuable.
Love it. I love it. So I want to thank you again, Jess. You are spectacular. You're a good friend, and you're also an amazing champion of the people space. And one thing I would just end with here as we're finalizing is, I want you all to feel the passion that this woman has for her job and for her space. She owns it, she loves it, and she's building her confidence and her career around that space. So anybody can do this, but Jess has done it exceptionally well. So thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you for those kind words.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, if you have enjoyed our topic, look out for new episodes every Tuesday morning. We like to rotate the topics and the themes, but the common theme among all the episodes is that we believe they are critical to your firm's growth and success. So please subscribe, and thanks so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great day.